The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. And, it's funny. People say, how do you choose your guests? I've done 50 of these shows, and the guests always love it for some reason. How do you choose your guests? And I tell them, if they wrote a book that includes the word passion and baseball, they can be on. Bob Wirz, you wrote a book that includes those words on the cover, passion and baseball. How are you?
I'm fine, Ralph, and I hope you are.
I am indeed. Nice talking to you. I admire that you wrote a book and it was published. And I also admire the word passion. And the title of my podcast, Lovin' Baseball when we were 12 and innocent. At age 12, if you're a baseball fanatic and you remember baseball as a kid, well, at age 12, you had enthusiasm combined with intellect. You knew what you were watching. You knew how to root, who to root for in your own head, and you knew that loyalty was very important at that age. It's the perfect title. You're the perfect guest. How, when you were 12, what year was it, Bob Wirz?
When I was 12 was 1949, which was the year that I saw my first 3 Major League Baseball games.
Wow. That's, who took you?
My mother and dad.
Okay.
And then my sister, Bev, and an aunt and uncle. And we were on a trip from Nebraska, from our home, back to see one of my mother's sisters in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And on the way, I had been a big Cardinal fan already by that time because of KMOX radio and a station in St. Joseph, Missouri, so I could hear many of the Cardinal games. And we stopped in Wrigley Field just to see the Cardinals and the Cubs.
Was this your first game at that time?
That's right. It was my very first game.
Wow.
And,
you got the third most written about rivalries in baseball. First being the Yankees, Red Sox, the Dodgers, Giants, but the Cardinals Cubs was right up there, and KMOX had a radio station that I listened to on my mother's radio in New York. It reached New York, 50,000 watts. At that time was clear sailing, and I used to listen to the St. Louis Hawks, who had my camp counselor Barney Cable played.
You know who the play-by-play voice was for the St. Louis Hawks in probably in the days?
I can't tell you offhand. Would you tell me?
Yeah, my friend Buddy Blattner.
Yes,
Buddy,
yes. Now I remember the name very well.
Buddy had been a major league infielder, and then after his playing days, he was probably best known for being Dizzy Dean's partner for 6 or 7 years on the game of the week, and he was the straight man while Dizzy was singing Wabash Cannonball and carrying on.
Wow, I'm so privileged to have you, Bob Wirz, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We have 3,000 plus, 3,100 offerings on archives on YouTube. So that's just for the audience. And I just want to tell you that I'm excited to have picked the topic. What was the game like?
What was
that first game?
It was. There were a couple of interesting things. It was 1 year to the day after the great Babe Ruth passed away, and they still had a moment of silence prior to the game at Wrigley Field in respect for the Babe a year later. It also was Ladies' Day, which was very popular in those days, and obviously they didn't have lights in Wrigley Field, so it was a day game. And what a treat for this young guy who had been following baseball for a few years. I kind of say that I fell in love with the game around the age of 8. That obviously is an estimate. So I'd had about 4 years before I got that first opportunity to see a major league game. And,
Bob, I just want to tell you that baseball and ladies is a good combination.
Yeah,
no matter how. Always was. That's off the cuff. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I was going to say I think I went back a few years ago and researched the box score on that game, and I started keeping score, but I guess I was too carried away with the fun of it. I didn't continue to keep score for the game, but I think the Cubs won it 5-4, and my man Stan the man, I think, had a perfect day. I want to say 2 for 2 plus 2 walks. If anybody wants to check.
That sounds like a typical box score of Stan Musial. Wow. Your first game, you got to see Stan. I got to see him at the Polo Grounds playing the Mets. Many, many years later. How did you come to write a book?
Well, I've spent most of my life in baseball, or working up the ladder toward a baseball career. And I was the Kansas City Royals' first PR director, 1969 to 1974. And
so
then I went
to know Whitey Herzog quite well.
Well, that was before Whitey joined the Royals, but I did know Whitey. He and his wife Mary Lou lived in Independence, Missouri, where I lived the last 4 years that I was working for the Royals. And don't get me started on reminiscing about that team. We were an expansion team, of course, and not much was expected of us, but we had a much better than expected debut in the major leagues. And it was just such a thrill for this young man who had grown up in Nebraska, longing for an opportunity in the game.
Now, you got to know Sid Thrift, I'm sure.
I sure did. All
right. He ran that baseball academy that produced Frank White, and I got to know him. I was the Topps representative baseball card on the West Coast, and I got to know Sid the weekend I signed Jim Thrift to his Topps contract. And I spent the weekend with Sid Thrift. My mind is still spinning from the knowledge of baseball and scouting that he bestowed on me.
He really, he was a wonderful man with a great sense of pride about the game.
And he had an integrity that couldn't be matched. So rest in peace. I've done several podcasts with Jim, and you bring back names or you bring back times. I interrupted. How did you come to write your book?
Well, after I had spent 16 years in the major leagues in public relations, then I left the commissioner's office and opened my own public relations business in sports, mostly in baseball. And
right.
So at the end of when I was winding down that career, I just knew that I had so many stories, so many people I'd been fortunate to meet, so many All-Star and World Series experiences and the like that I decided I would do a book. And I piddled around with it for a while, and I'd write, and then I'd quit writing, and then I got serious the last year or two with it, and ended up with those 350 pages in the passion of baseball, and just a great thrill for me to have that book out there, and selfishly speaking, Ralph, I think it's still a timely read. It's even though the events described occurred a few years ago, it's still most of what is said in there is still true today.
Bob, let me ask you a question. Is there anything that didn't get in the book that you wish had?
That's a good question. I know from time to time that I have said, gee, I didn't even touch on this, or I didn't touch on that. And Ralph, I've got a new book that just came out in November that is entitled My Nebraska. It's about my fondness for the state of Nebraska and my recollections of the wonderful childhood that I had there. And I talk about some of the baseball that we tried to get started, or some of the grassroots baseball that they had at that time. And I just decided, with my major league experience and my PR experience in my own business, why not write a book? And so I did, and now the second book is all about my love affair with the state of Nebraska and my memories of growing up there. And you ask about, do I have any things that I wish that I had put in? Yes. You always come up with things after the fact and say, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about this, or I didn't think about this person. So, but I don't think there'll be a sequel to either of these books.
Okay. I wrote a book, and I can tell you that it has to be a labor of love, but a labor nonetheless. And so I admire the fact that you completed 2. You trumped me, young man, and I hope you write. I hope you write 3, and I'll write 2. How about that?
That's a deal. We'll talk about that later. Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about that?
For the money.
No, absolutely. I was just thinking this morning about that. Money has to be of no concern. Just getting the word out, the cathartic feeling, the day the book arrives in the box and you never saw it before. How about that for a memory?
Yeah, that's a great feeling. There's no doubt about it. I look forward.
Can't be sold for money, for mere money.
Yeah.
Not that I would turn it down. I want you to know, but I lived this long without it. I'll live this long without it. That's the. I'll live longer without it. How about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Bob, your number one memory in baseball?
Oh my goodness. Well, I tell you what just jumped through my mind when you asked that question was the earthquake that hit during the World Series in Candlestick Park.
I lived in Oakland, right across the bay, and I felt that very earthquake. And were you there?
Yes, I was there. My wife had been with me for the two games in Oakland, and then she had gone home, and I stayed on for the remainder of the World Series, or what was intended to be the remainder of it. And I was with a friend, and we were walking to our seats in Candlestick, and our seats were up above third base in the upper deck, and we were literally walking down. We'd come in at a higher level and then had to walk down a few rows to our seats, and I literally don't think that I felt the earthquake, perhaps because I was holding on to a railing.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to our seats, and it was only minutes after that when you could see that the press box had gone dark. You could see people beginning to mill around on the field, and my friend that I was with, another baseball guy by the name of John Montague, and John says to me, he said, "Bob, you think they're going to play the game, don't you?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I can't see anything." And then somebody had a transistor radio, and they could hear on there the reports of the Bay Bridge to Oakland being so damaged, and then it became painfully aware that this was really a major event. We went, Ralph, if you don't mind me going on about this for a bit.
That's what I enjoy having you do.
We were staying at a downtown hotel, and we had intended to catch one of the baseball buses after the game, and because of the earthquake, they were, and it was hours ahead of when we would have ordinarily gotten on that. We found a city bus and took the city bus down to within about 8 or 10 blocks of our hotel. And there were a few of my baseball friends on the same bus. Ironically, a couple of people from my old team, the Kansas City Royals, John Wathen, the catcher, was on there.
Yeah.
So we get to our downtown destination, and everything is black except for when people had generators. So there were a few bars that were open, and we managed to get to our hotel. And I said to a bellman or someone there, I said, "Can we go to our room?" And they said, "Yes, we actually wish that you would." And I think we were on the 16th or 17th floor, and the stairwells still had light in them. So we were able to go up those 16 or 17 floors and find our room. I was able, almost with the Braille system, it seemed, to be able to call my wife again and tell her that we were safe, and for her to reach out to my boys and tell them what was going on, and eventually I went. I don't know what it says about me, but I went to sleep and had a fairly good night's sleep. And so that was the start of my.
Well, you have coolness in your blood. Another person who wandered the streets of San Francisco that night was Joe DiMaggio. It's been talked about that the superstars and the common people were brought together by this earthquake. It isn't something that money or status has anything to do with that. But you do have ice in your blood, Mr. Wirz.
Well, it was a memorable experience. And the next morning there were I think there were 5 or 6 of us wanted to get to the airport, and I carried a little transistor radio in those days, and I could tell from the radio that about 3/4 of flights were still going out of San Francisco. And I was going to Phoenix to visit my parents whenever I left San Francisco, and it happened to be that morning after the earthquake. So we hired a limousine to take us to the airport. We didn't see one iota of damage. And wow. I think within 45 minutes or so after I got to the airport, I was on a plane for Phoenix. And it wasn't until I walked into my mom and dad's apartment in the Phoenix area, and they had, I think it was CNN on, and that was the first time that I saw any damage firsthand from the earthquake, which was quite amazing. But we didn't see anything on the way to the airport, and could hardly believe our eyes at some of the sights at that time.
Wow. Not good memories, but vivid memories. I'll bet you'll agree. They will be with you for a lifetime. How about a good memory? Share that with us.
How about a what?
A good memory in baseball.
Well,
one
good memory. 1975 World Series, Game 6, Fenway Park. Carlton Fisk, 12th inning. You know what he did?
He waved that ball in.
Yeah. And Harry Coyle, who was the great director for NBC, got that shot that's been viewed thousands of times since 1975, and I think, Ralph, I think a lot of people think the Red Sox won the World Series because of that home run, but of course that only put it into Game 7, and Cincinnati prevailed the next night and won the first of back-to-back championships, because I know they swept your Yankees in four in a row in 1976.
Bob, let me ask you this. If you had to choose one dynasty, the A's dynasty, 73, 4, 5, or the Reds dynasty, which do you think which did you prefer? How about that?
Well, for me, the one that was more vivid was the Oakland dynasty, because they were in the same American League West with our Kansas City Royals, and so we had to battle Charlie Finley's wedding gown. What was it? Wedding gown white and gold uniforms.
Yes.
We had to battle with Catfish and Reggie and Sal Bando and Joe Rudy, and and that clan. So I personally remember that group of teams, or that series of for Oakland more than I was tied into the Big Red Machine.
Well, I just wanted to mention the name Campy Campaneris.
Oh, sure.
Along with those that you did, who are equally great. These guys were terrific. But Campy rode in the back of my yellow Toyota at one time, and was a good personal friend of Craig Pearson, who was I'm going to mention him too. He was the A's and the Cubs spring training doctor, and he fished with Campy, and he brought Campy to my home, our home, I guess, if to say it properly. My home would be in the back of a van somewhere, but I got to spend some time with Campy. I drove him to an old timers event in Oakland, and so are baseball memories great or what?
Oh, they're terrific. They're terrific.
All right.
I'm glad you. Do you know what Campy did in his first major league game?
I don't remember, but I do remember he played all 9 positions at one time. But in his first major league game, what did he do?
If memory serves me right, he hit 2 home runs for the Kansas City Athletics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And here's little Campy. If you wouldn't think he'd have the strength to get one out. And
yes, of course. He was lean and mean, but not a power hitter. Power thrower. I think he threw a bat. He got suspended once.
Right.
But that's another story.
Yeah,
We all have. That's for another podcast. Would you come back if you enjoyed this and you seem to? Let's do it again on a periodic basis. And if you have anything to say that irks you or you want to talk about, you have an open microphone here. So get in touch with me, and I'll get in touch with you.
Just a final note, Ralph. Just remember that those 2 books, The Passion of Baseball and My Nebraska, and they're both available.
You've inspired me to ask, where are they available? Pardon me.
They're both available at Amazon.com.
Okay.
The new book, I'm not sure about the Passion of Baseball, but the new book, My Nebraska, is also available at Barnes & Noble or BN.com. Those are 2 of the easier places. And
okay. Let me ask you about, I'm a New Yorker. I've been through Nebraska. I've flown over Nebraska. I know nothing about Nebraska. What is the one thing that you'd want me to know as a stranger that most people don't know about Nebraska?
Well, how kind the people are by and large. And this is not saying anything nasty about New Yorkers or anything, but the Midwestern people in general, they're a little more laid back, and they seem to be very genuine. But my little hometown of 140 people is right next to the Nebraska National Forest, which is 92,000 acres. They had a terrible fire there last summer that destroyed the state 4-H camp and the lookout tower, but it's still a beautiful place. And so I would encourage people, if you're passing through Nebraska, get off of the interstate and go up Highway 2 and see some of the beautiful ranch country.
Bob, I'm going to nominate you for the Chamber of Commerce in Nebraska. You can lead it. I hear the enthusiasm in your voice, and I love it. So, again, please come back, and we'll talk more ball anytime, any place.
Okay, Ralph. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend. Nice meeting you. Thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Bob Wirz is the guest, and I am probably the weak link of it all. How about that? But I'm a good producer. But I'm a good producer sometimes, and today was one of them. I'm really happy it worked out. Thanks, Bob. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Happy trails, and adios.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.